Hey, good morning. It is Tuesday, August 6th. Man, kids are already back in school. Brendan's got his coffee. Hurricane
my
Debbie.
kid is not. My kid doesn't go back to the 21st. Let's just talk about that.
Wow. That was like when I was on the quarter system in college at Auburn. We'd start the 24th of September. So it was always the last Saturday in September, Auburn, Tennessee, and that was kind of like third Saturday in October, some of these traditions. Got a great show in store for you today. We got Johnny Ballpark Franks from Nashville,
Awesome.
does a great show on the Mondays at 5 p.m. Check it out. You will love it. It's like talking just with friends, and man, does he know what he's talking about. Ralph Russo, AP's national college football writer, and from what I hear, quite the historian of college football. Love hearing him. I met him at Media Days out in Dallas. And at 8:40 Central, we will have Josh Graham. I call him Mr. ACC over in the Triad. That is Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and High Point. And we're going to get his thoughts on the ACC. There's a lot of ACC, SEC matchups. And then they've got Ole Miss coming in to Winston-Salem September 14th. And they're already on ACC Network. I saw one of the guys this morning on ACC Road Trip picking the upset. So SEC. Better be paying attention to what goes on around us, man. But we got a great show, and smash that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications on Android and iPhone. Get pen and paper handy. Here we come. Got a great shoe, as Ed Sullivan would say.
It's a really big show. Really big show.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, man. This is what I love. College football, 25 days away. If you're keeping track, it's easy. That's 600 hours. But there's also the week 0 games the week before over in the fatherland in Dublin. Georgia Tech and Florida State are going to play. I met Ralph Russo, I just mentioned at SEC Media Days. Talked to a lot of people about you, Ralph. They're going, man, that guy knows college football. And you mentioned you lived in the bold new city for about 5 years, Jackson. So you've been initiated. We get a little excited about college football down here in the South. But growing up, Johnny Ballpark Franks is on with us, my executive producer, Brenden Martin, down in Ocala, Florida. You read everything, and I still am a reader. It's like, again, lifting weights with your brain. Honored to have you on this show, and let's talk some college football, if you don't mind. I know you got about 20 minutes, so let's go.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Good to meet you down in Dallas. That was an interesting and fun couple of days.
Yeah, there's 1,200 people in there. It was I tell you one thing, having credentials to that thing is like having a ticket to the Led Zeppelin reunion. That's a hard ticket. That's a hard ticket to get. But yesterday, top 25 poll came out. No surprise, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Alabama. It's going to be fun though in November because everybody in the rankings is going to think, "Hey, I'm still alive." But let's get your thoughts on this first, I guess, official ranking that's come out.
Yeah, though I will say that's the coaches poll. The AP poll comes out a week from yesterday. So next Monday, August 12th, the AP poll comes out, probably about noon Eastern. So we like to think that's the official poll.
Yeah.
But it is the last word before the season. Listen, I mean, the fact of the matter is it probably is going to look that much different from what you saw yesterday, but we won't give you any more hints on that. Yeah, listen, the first thing that stands out is how dominant the SEC and Big Ten, and the SEC even more so. I think the SEC, I don't know, in yesterday's poll, I didn't pay as close attention. I think they had about 8 teams overall, but in the top 10, it's I think 4 SEC and 4 Big Ten. You mix in a little Notre Dame in there, and I think we knew this was coming, right? Super conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC have become the Big Two, the Power Two, something along those lines. They've separated themselves, but now it's here. And when you see it in the polls, you kind of go, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
Now I see what we're dealing with here with all this concentration of power and big time teams in these two conferences and what those schedules look like and what those rankings look like, and you start flipping your mind ahead quickly to like what a playoff could look like, a 12-team playoff with 4 or 5 SEC teams and 3 or 4 Big Ten teams. And it really drives home that we're walking into a new age of college football.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the cool narratives is Big Ten, SEC, so many in that top 10. The storylines for the whatever you want to call them underdogs are going to be pretty compelling because I see Florida State in there. Look, growing up in the South, an Auburn grad, following that Auburn-Florida State series, they play big boy football. Johnny's the Florida State grad. Florida State will put the fear of God into you. I mean, when those games were epic. So I consider them, part of the deal. I always have. But Johnny, jump in here with Ralph Russo, AP's national college football writer. This is a great conversation.
Ralph, first of all, it's an honor to be on here with you. I mean, you and I have talked on the telephone.
We have.
I mean, I consider myself a football historian. Ralph is the football historian. So I'm just trying to be the Ralph Russos of the world. First of all, you mentioned the SEC and the Big Ten, 8 of the top 9 in the coaches poll. And I do, by the way, Ralph, I do pay more attention, no offense, to the coaches poll. They play games.
Yeah.
And of course the SID fills out some of them. I do pay more attention to the AP poll. I especially like the AP poll of today compared to the AP poll of the 70s, in the sense that, some people back then when they voted in the AP poll, if a team was number 3, they were stubborn. They wouldn't move it around as much as we see now. There's, people who vote in the AP poll today, and I'm not sure exactly what those directions are, Ralph, but solid job in the sense that you see movement in the poll. And I love seeing that. And it's interesting with these preseason polls anyway, Ralph, in the sense that I look at what came out yesterday in the coaches poll. As I mentioned, 8 of the top 9 Big Ten, SEC. It's not going to play out that way because, like, for example, in the Big Ten, Ohio State's number 2 in the preseason, and yet they play 3 teams in the top 8. Something's got to give there. So when we start thinking these polls about who's overrated, underrated, first thing that sticks out for me is Tennessee. Because of their schedule, I have them, the possibility of them going 10-2. A 10-2 team is not going to be the 15th best team in the country. They will be a top 10 team, for example.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? I mean, I think we get such a build up with the preseason polls, and the off season of college football is so long too. It's the longest off season in all of sports, right? So what it allows us to do is we do way too early polls, and then we do way early polls, and then we do or rankings, and then we do post spring and post portal. And so I will say, like, I think over the years that I've been doing it, because of that trend, I think by the time you get to August with the quote unquote official polls, there's sort of been a built-in, sort of baked-in narrative to a certain degree. There's a little bit of a groupthink that comes around, and that's where the games end up breaking that over. I do agree with you, Johnny. In the time that I've been doing it, I've been doing this like 20 years, I've seen voters get more aggressive during the season, move teams around a little more aggressively, move teams that haven't lost down and things along those lines, especially early in the season. And I think that's a good thing. But I do, I find myself looking at, when I watch, one of the things I go to when I look at the top 10, or let's just start with the top 10, is I know, because I've covered this long enough, at least 2 of those teams in the top 10 probably won't even be ranked at the end of the season. That's the average. The average is about 1.5 to 2 teams start in the top 10 and aren't even ranked. And then there's probably an average of about a couple of teams that end up not even ranked, that end up in the top 10 every year. So what I find myself doing is like looking at those top 10 teams and thinking, wow, we think these teams are going to be really good. Somebody's going to wash out in there, right? I don't know
Yeah.
if it's Texas or Alabama, probably not, but somebody within that group is going to have a really poor year. And you also mentioned the schedules and how that plays out too. That's what's going to be even more fascinating. Again, going back to this idea that all these teams play each other more often because they're in the same conference. I'm interested to see how voters react to team has 2 or 3 losses, but let's take Georgia, for example. Plays on the road at Texas, plays on the road at Alabama. 2 monster road games, not to mention starting the season on a neutral Atlanta site game against Clemson. But what does a team like that look like ranked if it has 2 losses and takes care of the rest of its schedule? So, again, we're entering like very new territory here, and I'm really interested to see how some of those big matchups affect the rankings. And if voters say, you know what, those 2 teams are both great, we're going to leave them where they are, even though one of them lost.
Ralph, I love this historical perspective here. And I think about 2004 bookends, Oklahoma and Southern Cal 1 and 2 all year long. And there's Auburn looking on the from the outside looking in, kind of like Clifford, the big red dog when I had kids. Is he looking out or is he looking in? They didn't get in. Heartbreak Hotel. But then, you saw what Southern Cal did to Oklahoma, and then it was stripped from them, whatever. Don't you think what the real cool story about college football is? It's this year the 13th and the 14th and the 15th teams. They're going to be the ones raising all the hell. But that's what makes college football so much fun is the never-ending debate. And then you got to have great writers like you to back it up. And so don't ever – you look like a young guy. Don't ever retire. I always tell people that.
Not that young. I'm far closer to retirement than I am to getting started here. I would say it will be interesting. I think though, as much as you mentioned sort of my background, and yes, I worked in SEC country for about 5 years. I worked out in West for about 3 or 4 years, but most of my background, I grew up in New York City, and I live here now. So people kind of look at me a little askance. So how did you get into college football? It's a long story, but like, I just loved it at an early age. I remember watching games on TV, just being like, man, Baton Rouge looks like the most amazing place in the world. And Lincoln, Nebraska looks so cool.
That's awesome.
But I would also say that, like, I've always been someone who thought, the postseason, we need to figure out, like, why can't the Big Ten champion just play the SEC champion or the Big 12 champion, or back when it was the Big 8 champion. So I like the evolution. I do agree, like, we're going to have some very interesting discussions about number 11, 12, 13, even within the playoff, though, even within the teams that get in. One of the things I've been like, the folks at the CFP did this at the SEC, and they were going around the country to other media days doing it, kind of reminding people, and it's one of my jobs too, going into the season, that this new playoff's got some quirky little things about it, right? Yeah. Remember, like, you can be the second best team in the country conceivably and not get a bye, right? Because those 4 byes are going to be reserved for conference champions. So, like, I'm almost positive there's going to be an SEC team that loses the SEC championship game that's thinking, boy, we're really good and we're 5th seeded, or maybe we're 6th seeded, or something along those lines. Then you have, like, the fact that you're going to have a group of 5 team champion, most likely getting one of those late seeds, and that could bump out a team again, maybe an SEC or a Big 12 team that's sitting there at number 12 and they're gone. So there's a bunch of quirky stuff about the playoff that I think people are going to have to kind of get used to. And I think that will lead to a whole bunch of arguments too, because we'll be arguing about 5 and 6, and we'll be arguing about 11 and 12 and 13. I do think that is part of college football. I don't think you want to remove the arguments. I think you just like to have a playoff system that's a little better equipped to settle some of them, so you don't have what you had last year with Florida State.
Rob, but to his point, to Ralph's point, we've always had the politics involved. I mean, and the thing that I hate, we have so much faith that, now that we have 12 teams, we're going to get it right. Why do you say that? Because if, to me, who was the best team in the country last year?
Georgia.
Thank you very much. And see that but you couldn't have Georgia in. You had to take Alabama. But here's the problem. I think they really did want to take Florida State last year, but you couldn't bring in Alabama without bringing in Texas. And so that was the way to. But honestly, if you were doing it, the best teams looking at start to finish, the best team in the country last year was Georgia. And I can honestly say that. But so we look at this new system with 12 teams. Are they going to get it right? I don't know. Once again, when we still talk about politics, I hope that that's the case, but we don't.
So I would say this: when you get down to 12 teams, you're not missing a team. You may miss a team that deserves to be in, but it's very unlikely. But it's very unlikely you're missing a team that could win the national championship.
I mean, I go back, Ralph and Rob, to the point where Cincinnati, if you're going to play in a conference with a weak schedule like that, with so many teams ranked in the bottom third in the country as far as Division I, to me, you have to earn your right. I don't care about the unbeaten record. I want to see you better have your non-conference schedule tough, where all 4 games are tough, not because you've got all of these Vanderbilts on your schedule as far as the Vanderbilts of their conference. And so I think in recent years, Cincinnati should not have been in the playoff. Georgia last year should have been in the playoff. So, I'm like you, Ralph. I think at the end, if you're arguing about 11 or 12, I get it. But the other point you made about Georgia, I'm already out there. I know Clemson is a 13.5-point underdog against Georgia. I see Georgia getting upset by Clemson. I see Georgia 2-2. I see Georgia 2. I see Georgia 2-2 going into the month of October. Now, what happens? How do they deal with adversity? Are they going to be able to deal with adversity? Alabama couldn't deal with it in 2010, and they had Mark Ingram, Julio Jones, Greg McElroy, those guys back from that national championship team. So don't be shocked to see Georgia 9-3 or even 8-4 this year after their 2-2 start.
Johnny, I'm sorry. I'm going to be shocked. Now, I could see them losing a couple of games because we saw that schedule. I think they're going to roll Clemson. Clemson's got to show me that it's fixed its offense. And I say roll, we're probably not looking at like a 42-10, but they're about a 13 or 14 point favorite. And I think that's probably the range there. Clemson's got a really good defense again, though it's younger. And again, Dabo not going into the portal. You don't sort of fortify your team with a little experience in some places. So you have very good talent, but you end up with some holes and some depth that maybe others don't have. But I do get your point. It will be interesting to see what happens with Georgia if they do take a loss or two, because they're 42-2 over the last 3 seasons. They have as many losses as they have national championships. And I would tend to the folks in Ann Arbor would disagree. I would say this. I think Georgia and Michigan were the best 2 teams. That's what I would say. I think Georgia and Michigan were the best 2 teams, and circumstances kept Georgia out as much as anything. But, I would also say, Georgia, how about beating Alabama? Throughout all this run, they still have had a losing record against Alabama. So there is something to be said there. Maybe that changes.
0. Yeah. Ralph, you are, let's talk about your travel schedule. I know you just got a few minutes. You're in New York. And by the way, you got to give us a good restaurant or two, because we got people that watch this show all over the place. Everybody goes to New York and stuff
Italian.
Yeah.
I got one for you in my neighborhood.
There you go.
I'll get you on the way out here.
The neighborhood ones are the best. But you got to come back on with us. You are a serious, like Johnny, a student of history. And that makes that history, traditions, and heroes is the whole theme of SEC Sidelines Sports Network and SECU. So I like what you said about, I don't like it, but Georgia has got to get over the problem in Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Alabama. And that's a compelling storyline. Talk more about that.
Yeah, listen, for all Georgia's success, they've had issues figuring out Alabama. Now, again, when Saban's now gone, I mean, gosh, we can do a whole show and segment on just obviously. I can only imagine how much you've talked about that transition, and nothing is more. There's no story in the SEC more compelling to me than the transition of DeBoer to who I know is a good coach because his record says so, and I believe very strongly that you are what your record is. Like coaches who have had success at other levels, that's a good indication that you will be successful at the highest levels. But the fact of the matter is, there's still transition. What does the transition Milroe in his offense look like? Does it bring Milroe to a new level, or is he not necessarily the perfect fit there? I was looking at Alabama's roster and found myself going like, I still am wondering a little bit about big time playmakers. Is Ryan Williams that guy coming in as a freshman? Maybe.
Yes.
So got some questions about, but I do think, they play, Georgia plays Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I think that's such an important game because, again, Saban's gone. You have Alabama in transition. This is the time for Kirby sort of to take his program and really stamp it and say, listen, we've passed those guys. They are no longer the thing that's in our way. We are them. We are the big dogs here.
Yeah.
And listen, 2 national championships, you can't really, you can't really argue with that. But that little hiccup there against Alabama, I really feel like they need to go into Tuscaloosa and say, hey, man, like we're done with this being on equal footing. We're the team in the SEC now.
Yeah, Ralph. Yeah. Ralph, I wanted to ask you from a historical perspective. I do a podcast with my father, Buddy Martin, who's on this network, and we were talking to Urban Meyer yesterday. We do a football show with him. We were just talking about Michigan. Coach had some interesting stuff to talk about. Say,
yes, he did.
Where he was like, he said, I got into an argument with a bunch of my colleagues about is sign stealing a part of the game? Is it gamesmanship? He said, during a game, sure, if you pick up something, whatever. But then obviously the level that Michigan went, what we're hearing about yesterday, the day before, about all of the things sort of unfolding. From a historical perspective, that's a big question, I know, but how do you feel that sort of is going to play out, especially, going into this year as well? What's going to happen over there at Michigan?
Listen, it's hard to even put it in a total historical perspective because the NCAA isn't quite what it used to be. And, listen, my feeling is always this, and this even goes back to, we talked about 2004 USC. Hey, man, I saw those games played. I saw Reggie Bush. Like that happened. So that's still my national champion, right? Like
it cannot unhappen.
No.
Yeah, you can vacate all you want. And if I'm a Michigan fan and I have all these Ohio State fans going tisk and shame on you, hey man, you can talk to the trophy. Like we beat you. So I do think that there will be some repercussions at Michigan. My guess is I don't think they will be the most serious of repercussions. I think it's highly speculative of me to sort of like dive into that road because there's still a lot that we don't know there. But again, like I said this all during last year, unless you're going to do something to them that impacts the season that was going on, once it's in the books, it's in the books, and everything else is just, is postscript that I don't know is as meaningful other than that we can wave a finger and say, oh, you guys cheated while Michigan hangs their banners.
Yeah. Well, and a follow up to that. Sorry, Rob. I wanted to ask Ralph, and I know he's got to get to go, but the landscape as a whole of college football, right? And how everything's sort of shaking out with this kind of things. Does the Urban talked yesterday about the NCAA not having any more power? He was discussing how every time they put their they flex, they lose the lawsuit. And therefore, then that's happening more often. He says, I'm worried about the governing body of the NCAA as do they really have any more power? What is your take on that?
They don't have much, but we are moving to an era where this thing is going to look a lot more like professional sports when it comes to governing structure. Yeah, it's going to be deregulated. Listen, we're paying the players. The odd thing about the Michigan scandal is it does have a little bit of an on the field thing, though I would also suggest that everybody steals signs, but you can't steal signs this way. And I think that what ends up happening is as soon as you get into that gray area of even for a coach, well, we steal signs, but we don't do it that way. Well, then is it really that bad to steal signs? Because once you draw the line and sort of say, well, here's the line isn't you can't steal signs. So going back to your bigger question, yes, the NCAA doesn't have nearly as much power as it used to. Michigan is going to fight whatever whatever kind of punishment it does get. And again, I don't think the punishment will be severe enough for a lot of people, but probably too severe for Michigan fans because that's the way this works. And I do think that I wouldn't worry too much about that, though, because I do think we're moving towards a system that, again, is going to be governed a little bit more like professional sports, and it'll still look like it's supposed to look on the field. So, again, I don't get too hung up on that it's an interesting story because it's part of the evolution of college sports. Yeah, but I don't think it's going to necessarily hurt the game. I think in many ways, I'm more hopeful that it actually helps the product.
Yeah. Look, Ralph, I know you went a little bit long. You got to come back soon. Thank you so much. And, people say there's not the college football interest in New York and all BS. I've been up there a lot. My sister lived up there out of college. There were bars in every neighborhood. Everybody knows that to cover the SEC schools. Al Barbaro, my friend with Eaton Vance, was from Boston. I worked with him for years, money manager firm, and he was from Boston. He watched SEC games on the New England Sports Channel as a kid and grew up a Tennessee fan, married an Alabama grad, now is a season ticket holder in Tuscaloosa and lives in Prattville, just north of Montgomery. Ain't that America? Okay, let people know how they can follow you.
Gotham Gator Club is still one of the biggest clubs in the United States.
Yeah,
you mentioned it perfectly. I always say that there's more than enough college football fans up here because everybody moves here.
Exactly.
Right? And everybody's an alum of somewhere, graduates from their school and moves here for a job. So there's a bar everywhere in New York to watch your favorite team. You can follow me at Ralph D. Russo AP, Ralph D. Russo AP. That's on X. You can find my stories at apnews.org. Oh boy.
We all know that pain. We all know that pain.
Yeah. I'm having a little bit of a blank there. But
it
anyway,
just changed or
On
something.
Twitter, and you can find my Twitter, or actually you can find all my stories there. It's a good time coming on with you guys. I very much appreciate it. I'll give you the restaurant review. I'll give you the restaurant before I roll. Yeah. So I live in Brooklyn. I live in a neighborhood called Park Slope. One of the best Italian restaurants is literally 2 blocks from my house. Barely 2 blocks, really. It's called Al Di La, Aldila, 3 words. Al Di La, old school Italian restaurant, one of the best in Brooklyn. So if you get up to Brooklyn, if you get up to New York, come to Brooklyn because we got a lot of cool stuff here, and go to that restaurant.
Has any mafia member been shot or killed there, by the way?
No.
Okay, just asking.
I can give you a couple of those too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Antoine's
that does not have that.
Hey, Ralph. I remember as a kid watching Welcome Back, Kotter. They'd come in Brooklyn, America's 4th largest city. Remember that?
Yes.
But anyway, love having you on. Keep writing. We're going to do it again soon. And what an honor. Ralph Russo, AP's national college football writer. Have a great day, man. Thanks.
Bye, Ralph.
Thank you, guys. Have a great.
Hey, that is fun. Let's play that segment. Johnny, God, love having you on here. You talk about historians of historians of historians. That was really cool. And it is fun. Like everybody, when they go to New York, if they're up there for a weekend during football season, they will tell you they'll go to their school's bar. And it is absolutely packed. People don't realize what it's like up there on Wall Street, down at the Battery and all these college. And it ain't just the SEC. It's everybody up there. And there's all these little restaurants. Al Di La. Now, see, let's get, like you said, remember when David Letterman, back when late night TV was funny, it wasn't all political, he said, one of the toughest jobs you could have in New York City, Paul Schaefer, ladies and gentlemen, Paul Schaefer and the band, he would be a mob corpse debloater. Remember back during the late 80s, it was really bad up there. It's like,
you're going deep right now. I can't. I love Letterman, but I don't know what the hell that was.
Oh, he talked about that. Letterman, he would talk about that with Larry Bud Melman and Biff and Brother Theodore. I am.
See, Brenden, Rob is being a little naive right now. So we have like 8 million plus New Yorkers, right?
Yeah.
4 million, look, it's not that they're huge college football fans. It's just like you're doing fantasy football and you're pulling for the guy from San Francisco when you're not a fan of San Francisco. It's called having a little action on the games.
I got a little something on the game.
It increases your enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly.
It does. Hey, check out. Look, let me say something real quick about our sponsors. Coolmore Logistics and Transportation, Memphis-based with a global reach. Anything that you need moved, steel coils, seed, cotton, lumber, bricks, anything, less than truckload, full truckload, containers, they can get it shipped. You make the call to Coolmore Logistics. They post it, and in a matter of minutes, their phones blow up. Nobody will outwork Robert Weaver, John Dickin, and the crew in Memphis. I'll be over there for a lunch meeting tomorrow at Coolmore Logistics. And also the great folks at Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee, open Monday through Saturday, as they say down here in the South, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. They got all the new fall stuff coming in. Filson, Schaefer Outdoors, Pendleton, Duckhead, STS. They've got over 7,000 pairs of boots. I bought me a pair of brand new behind me Greater Kudu boots the other day. I got those hats back there. They got them for all these SEC schools. They got the shirts from Acres Down South, all of it at hewlettandunn.com. And the vitamin shop open Monday through every day of the week, actually. Monday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sundays, 10:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Oxford, Mississippi. I'll be down there later today for a lunch meeting with Yancey Porter, our good friend of Rebel Yell Hotline, and also the Vitamin Shop in Olive Branch, Mississippi on Goodman Road. Check them out on the QR codes. Johnny, look, man, I thought that was a great conversation.
I see these questions on the side.
Let me get back in there. I'm on the big screen. I can't see them.
Well, let's address those, Johnny. I asked Urban yesterday. We got a quick soundbite about Lane Kiffin, what he thought about Lane Kiffin. I thought this would be a nice way to segue. It's just about a minute if you would hang through, and then we react to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's interesting about this is from Best Fridays in Football podcast that we do with Buddy Martin, Urban Meyer, and myself every week. And this is a clip from last night. Lane Kiffin, what Ole Miss has got going on there. The subject was bantied about a bit. And I asked the question to the group. I said, well, is Lane Kiffin, this is a tough spot to be in, right? I think he's always sort of been playing from underdog and, don't expect him to win where he is. But now he's got everything he seemingly needs. Is he ready for this kind of pressure? Because they're expecting him to win at Ole Miss.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the book written about Lane Kiffin. We've actually become friends over the years. It didn't start off well back in 2008 when he went to Tennessee, but he's done everything that you're supposed to do at a school like Ole Miss. First of all, he sells himself. He sells the school. It is a great school. It's a great environment. And then he's done the transfer portal and used that to his advantage. I think it's really interesting. He says he's not in agreement with it, but he's used it to his advantage. So good for him. So I think certainly Ole Miss has become a have. It was kind of a medium to have not for many, many years. Although, Houston, there's been some really good teams come out of Ole Miss, but I think he's raised the level, like you said, for a long time. When people aren't pointing arrows at you, it's kind of fun to win. I did that at Utah. No one knew of Utah. It was kind of fun to ride that hill. Now he's on top of the hill, and people are going to be shooting for him.
Great stuff, man. I watched that late last night, Johnny and Brenden.
Cool. What do you think about that, Johnny, about what he says about Kiffin?
I love history, and I love when things have not happened in a long time and finally seeing it rise up again. I had Archie Manning on my show recently. We were talking about this, and it's hard to imagine that Ole Miss has not won the SEC championship in football since 1963. They won a national championship. They won 3 between 59 and 62, but no SEC titles since 63. So I'm going to throw it out there. Why not? They've got everything in place. I remember Lane Kiffin when he first heard about how much money Bryce Young was getting as far as name, image, and likeness. This was a month into name, image, and likeness. We were at SEC Media Days in 2021, and Lane Kiffin was so blown away, knowing you could just see and feel everything moving in his brain, understanding the fact that Ole Miss was not equipped to deal with that kind of money. Now they are. And to me, why not? I think it will be Ole Miss playing in Atlanta for the SEC championship. And I think Ole Miss can ride this all the way through as long as they don't have they got to stay healthy. But with that, especially at quarterback, but with that, was that being the case, why not Ole Miss this year? Since I think Georgia is going to stumble this year, I'm going to pick Ole Miss to win the SEC title and play for a national championship.
I will not be surprised. Ole Miss, Johnny Vaught, that 25-year run, incredible. 196 wins, 6 SEC titles, 3 national championships, and they stumbled a lot after him. What Lane Kiffin has done is he's got Ole Miss people now believing, okay, I'm going to the game, not just going to the Grove. Now, there's still going to be a lot of people in the Grove, but the people at Ole Miss, I'll be down there today up on the square at Tallahatchie Grill with Yancey Porter, and we're going to be going around Oxford. They are on another level right now. It's going to be different, though, because any loss, it's not going to seem catastrophic, but you better not have more than a couple, and they better be quality and they better be close. But Jackson Dart was asked this question at SEC Media Days by someone, what if Ole Miss is a host? What's Oxford going to be like? He goes, I don't know if Oxford can handle it. And I said to him, bigger than Double Decker? He laughed about it. But, I mean, that's Double Decker, by the way, that festival in late April, about 100,000 people. And there's a lot of drinking and dancing and just it's a big-time party. Josh Graham from the Triad over in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, is going to be on with us in just a minute. He is driving, so we'll be on the phone only. It probably is what's going on. But Josh Graham, I call you Mr. ACC because whenever I watch something on ACC Network, like Media Days, Commissioner Jim Phillips, you were one of the first questions on there. You came on the show about a year ago when Wake Forest was out in Omaha in the College World Series. Incredible job. I hear you on Chuck Oliver a lot. Listen to that show every day, Southern Sports Today. First off, what's cool to me is I got a son that lives in Charlotte, and that's what they call Metrolina, Charlotte, Concord, Rock Hill, and Gastonia. But you're Winston-Salem, High Point, Greensboro. They love naming, and then, of course, the Research Triangle. But college football is a big deal up there. Been watching ACC Road Trip. They were in Winston-Salem yesterday. Those folks are serious about football up there, too. And let's talk about what's going on in the ACC and where they stand right now. And you got a bunch of good matchups coming up, including some with the SEC like Ole Miss September 14th.
Yeah, I'll be at that game in Winston-Salem. And you're right, there's a lot of people that are investing in football. It's the big push by ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips to push back on some of the marketing from Brett Yormark and the Big 12. It's important to look in the backgrounds of some of these commissioners, and he's not a former AD. He's a marketing expert. So when he stood up there for a half hour and tried to sell us on the idea that the Big 12 is stronger and deeper without Texas and Oklahoma, it was hard to watch without laughing. And then you hear Jim Phillips push back on it last week, and his response was, here are figures from 1099 forms about the revenue that this league is creating. Here are the championships that our schools won. The last time a school that is currently in the Big 12 Conference won a national championship was Colorado in 1990. The ACC's got Florida State and Clemson. Yes, they're suing the league to try to figure out a way out. Nobody has still found a smoking gun to try to get out of the league. So as long as those schools are still part of this conference, the ACC, even though they might not have the same enthusiasm as Brett Yormark and some of the salespeople out in the Big 12, they're still the third best conference in college football. And that, regardless of what greedy university presidents always looking for more will continue to tell you that is good enough.
Johnny, Ballpark Franks is on with us, Josh. He is an FSU grad, and weigh in here on that great opening statement by Josh Graham.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the ACC is not like the SEC and Big Ten with the depth at the top, like we're talking about. But as long as you have Florida State and Clemson there, and then you've got those above average teams that you don't want to have to go to their place. We're talking about the North Carolina States of the world, even the Hurricanes of Miami, for example.
But Johnny, can I push back on one thing?
Sure.
This is something that ACC coaches, like more than a few assistants, head coaches, told me privately in Charlotte a few weeks ago. What you just said, I acknowledge with the SEC. Okay, they've earned it on the field. They probably deserve one more automatic qualifier like we're seeing in the projections for the 14-team playoff. When you lump the Big Ten into that, that's where I have issues because people in the Big Ten will say this with a straight face. And again, it's hard not to laugh at it when they say, oh, the ACC is just Florida State and Clemson. That's all you guys got in terms of being competitive. And I laugh because that's all the Big Ten is with Michigan and Ohio State. Now, you can say Penn State is a program with all this history or whatever, but then why can't the ACC say the same thing about Miami?
You know why?
The same way as well. Why is
Josh, you know why? Because the ACC does not have Oregon coming in to play football this year. And
we'll
so
see
that's
how they
why
acclimate, though.
Oh, they'll be fine. Oregon will be fine, especially when you got the Nike dollars out there. And when I say top heavy, look, now the Big Ten, 18 teams. So now we have 14 mediocre teams or above. I mean, and some of these teams wish they were mediocre as far as the Big Ten. So, Josh, I totally agree. When you look at depth from top to bottom, Big Ten can't match with the ACC. Historically, over the last 10 years, the ACC is certainly from top to bottom a better league than the Big Ten. I mean, the Big Ten gets there with Ohio State, Michigan, and maybe one other team. But until they expanded, who were those other 11 teams? Now it's going to be, once again, adding some other mediocrity to that. So there'll be 13 or 14 mediocre teams as far as
we're both. So we're both saying the same thing. And
I'm saying top heavy. I'm just saying top heavy as far as the preseason, knowing you've got Ohio State, Oregon, which is still hard to wrap your arms around, being the Big Ten, Michigan, and Penn State.
But here's the question then. Why is the messaging such? And the point I was making is that messaging with Clemson and Florida State has been going on for the last decade from Big Ten folks who lumped themselves with the SEC. But I mean, haven't one say?
I will answer that question, Josh. On Sunday we had an American win the gold medal, and not only was he the fastest man in the 100 meters, and Noah Lyles, he's also one of the biggest talkers as far as from track. And here's the problem: the SEC and the Big Ten, they talk better than the ACC. The ACC expects, well, here we are, and so getting that message across to the West Coast, to the East Coast, nobody does it better than the SEC or the Big Ten compared to these other conferences, and that's the problem.
I think I agree with that, but I'll put it a different way. I think the issue is one that the ACC can't solve in this sense. The reason the Big Ten is viewed similarly as the SEC is because of what their schools look like versus the way the ACC schools look like. And what I mean is the reason why they get these massive television deals, despite not being any much more productive than the ACC, is because of how big the alumni base is of most of these schools in the conference is. When you look at the makeup of the ACC, there are a lot of Wake Forests, a lot of Dukes, a lot of Virginias, schools that are not the largest schools out there, and thus probably do not view the same bring in the same television ratings as a result, not having those large alumni bases. And then when you look at the ESPN part of this, the ACC has the ACC network, just like the SEC has the SEC network. But as Paul Feinbaum, or as Dabo Sweeney said about Paul Feinbaum a few weeks ago, Dabo is wondering why they don't see ACC network folks on ESPN's Get Up, why you don't see any of the ACC network figures cross-promoted on ESPN's top programming the way that you see from SEC network folks regularly, like Laura Rutledge, and you see her all across the network. You see Paul Feinbaum everywhere as the SEC's hitman, crushing everybody other than SEC coaches when he's on the main platform from ESPN. So that's part of it too, where you have to have a platform to be louder, as you're talking about, but also the other piece is just the makeup of your conference, which shouldn't really matter about like actual on the field competition. Like, it shouldn't be television ratings that decide who the best conferences are by any means, but that is happening to some degree with the Big Ten versus the ACC.
Hey, Josh, I see a question, and this, Rob, and I'm going to bring you this. I see where Buck's talking about, and this is where perception is not reality, but unfortunately in college football it is, because facts don't seem to matter. But Buck says the Big Ten is way deeper than the ACC. It's not even close. But the problem with that statement, now we don't know what that means now with Oregon and USC, for example, being added to the Big Ten. But prior to 2024, facts don't back up what Buck just said. I mean, we're usually talking about a 3-team league out of 14 teams as far as the Big Ten. And I'm not making that up. I mean, look at, if Iowa is your team playing for a Big Ten title, Iowa did not deserve to be in any conference championship last year. Maybe not even in a group of 5. I don't know. We have to examine some of the other group of 5 championships from last year. But
also, by the way,
I'm not what college football fans feel, unfortunately.
Also, I'm not as sold on Oregon as you are. I'm not. I get Dylan Gabriel's over there. He's just going to recreate what Bo Nix did. But I'm telling you, when you're playing Big Ten schools and you have the travel element to this too, I'm not as confident that if Oregon and Washington couldn't win a national championship in the league that they played in the Pac-12, then I struggle to believe that with Michigan and Ohio State in your conference, that you're going to be anything better than Penn State, that you're going to be anything better than these other schools. Because, again, I am old enough to remember when Miami and Virginia Tech joined the ACC, and everybody told me that every year that these teams were going to be national title contenders. It turns out when you join a conference, you start to fit in, and you take hold of a different identity. And if you weren't the national championship winning program before, odds are when you jump up in competition, and yes, the Big Ten is a jump up from the Pac-12, I struggle to believe that you perform better than you did before.
But see, Josh, you're hurting yourself in your argument, because my argument that the ACC, as far as being top, you were like earlier, you were saying that, oh wait, the ACC is there. The reason why I think Oregon will be successful in the Big Ten, I go back to the fact that other than Ohio State, Michigan, and I can't even really give you Penn State, because Penn State's been underperforming every time when we think they're supposed to be good. They're certainly not performing to the magnitude of James Franklin and what he's getting paid. But the reason why Oregon will be successful is because the Big Ten is pretty mediocre when you start getting down to the 4th, 5th, 6th, down to the 12th or 13th team.
Oh, I agree. And
that's why they will be successful.
But I think Oregon's more like that second tier than they are Ohio State and Michigan. That's the point I'm making. They might be ranked number 3 in that coaches poll yesterday, but I think they're more like Penn State than they are like programs that are going to win the national championships.
Well, let me throw this one in here for argument's sake. This is a great discussion. Josh Graham, Mr. ACC from the Triad over in Winston-Salem. Johnny Ballpark Franks, Rob Browne here with you on this Tuesday morning. Okay, so last year, in the 2 years Kalen DeBoer was at Washington, they beat Oregon 3 times. He was 3-0 against Oregon. Washington played the Big Ten, for the national championship. They played the Big Ten champion Michigan, and Michigan curb stomped Washington. I mean, so there's something that you can draw. You can extrapolate from that.
No, wait. I wouldn't go that far. The game.
Well, I'm just saying,
if Michael Penix was not on that, everybody, we always talk about the stage, and you got to be on. So if Michael Penix had even been an average Michael Penix, that probably game would have gone down to the final drive. Because remember, going into the 4th quarter, that game could have gone either way. All right,
Yeah,
but anyway.
no, but Michael Penix, I think, had 2 or 3 cracked ribs. But I think both of y'all are making a lot of great points. But I think the Big Ten was founded in 1896. If you go back and look, I know Michigan has won the Big Ten 45 times. Ohio State, I think, 39, and then there's everybody else. And you had Iowa last year, a 10-win team with no offense. And they played a true freshman quarterback. Now, granted, he's not just, Joe Sixpack from Olathe, Kansas, Nico Iamaleava, but they get beat 35-0 or whatever in the bowl game. But I do think the ACC, if you look, Josh, at the matchups, regular season, home and home, SEC, ACC, they're about 500. I mean, I don't, and I'm an SEC, I'm an Auburn grad, but I got to be fair. I think when you look, let's talk about this one. September 14th, Josh, Ole Miss traveling to Winston-Salem for that game and at a Legacy Stadium. Let's talk about that. How big is that game going to be for the ACC? I mean, that's going to be a trophy game, I would imagine.
I don't think so. Just because Wake Forest is
just if they could pull the win. I'm not saying they're going to.
The way
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't see it happening.
Exactly. The game that you have to circle week 1 is Georgia and Clemson. If you want to talk about a trophy game, that's a trophy game and it's amazing how much things get forgotten. Like the ACC having a winning record against the SEC last year, including beating the brakes off of LSU and a Heisman Trophy winner to open the season last year. It's amazing how that stuff kind of gets forgotten when Florida State gets left out of the college football playoff at the end of the year unbeaten, despite beating 2 SEC schools by double digits. That stuff, it is kind of, and I get the injury piece and all that. We don't need to really relitigate it. But the problem that you're talking about, or that last year showed us, is the ACC can still win some of these trophy games, but then it gets forgotten, it gets swept under because of this perception problem and the lack of a microphone that the ACC is given by its television partners, and just having the function of having a league with a lot of smaller schools.
Yeah, for the record, everybody, I did not predict that Wake Forest would beat Ole Miss. I didn't say. I was just saying that's a big game. I have not lost my mind yet.
And Rod, to Josh's point, and this is what's going to happen. So Clemson beats Georgia like I predicted, and then Georgia then loses to Alabama the last part of September. So now Georgia's 2-2, and then Georgia maybe loses 1 or maybe even 2 more games. I can easily see that happening at that point. And to Josh's point, at that point, what will be the conversation? Not that Clemson beat Georgia. Georgia's off this year. And so Clemson then will not get the respect, the fact that they put Georgia on that path. So if that is indeed what happens, and that Clemson caused that to happen, that does not get enough credit. And people don't understand that when they're looking at, if you don't really break down college football, it's about rhythm. It's about consistency.
Correct.
But when you get derailed, what do they always talk about? Don't allow one loss to turn into 2. And then that second one turn into 3. And that's what usually happens to even some really solid teams.
And the SEC hype machine still will be inconsistent in this sense, though. Last year, I had to hear about how LSU was off. That game doesn't really hold much water. And then in the same week, I had to hear about how Jaden Daniels is the Heisman Trophy winner.
I know. I agree. I agree 100%.
Wait a minute.
100%.
Michael Penix is the Heisman Trophy winner?
100% I agree.
Are you bad? Are you bad and the Florida State win means nothing and Alabama should be left out? Or are you good and your quarterback deserves the Heisman Trophy?
That defense for Florida State. And here's the thing that really and I still go back to last year. Even with the injury, Florida State's third-string quarterback produced more offense in that ACC championship game and more than Michigan produced against Iowa in the Big Ten championship. So here's Florida State with no chance on offense, but people kept forgetting that defense did destroy Jaden Daniels. It wasn't that Jaden Daniels was off. Florida State's defense made Jaden Daniels off that night.
That's Josh. That's what people drives me crazy. People will say so and so had a bad game. Well, God, if he didn't have that 11-man defense on the other side of the line of scrimmage, he probably would have had a great night throwing in air.
But I'm fine with whatever argument. Just tell me which of the arguments it is. Like, is your team not good because of Florida State beating the brakes off of you, or is your team good and your quarterback should win the Heisman Trophy? When SEC people look me in the face and say both, that's when I have problems.
Well, I'm old school. I'm always going to say, give all the credit in the world to that team across the way in the other locker room. Ain't a damn thing you can do except get up and lay it on the line again and again and keep fighting. That's how I look at it, and always give credit to the other team. And when people say the best team didn't win, I go, well, they did not win today because that's why they keep score. I mean, you have to give credit for that. But I will say this, Josh, I've got a lot of ACC family. They're all Virginia Tech people from Roanoke. Brother-in-law played football for Virginia Tech. Son lives in Charlotte. You talk about a crossover town. You got the ACC headquarters there. We were downtown back in February, and Bank of America Stadium, showdown, the Wolfpack, and Tennessee, Smokey the Hound and the Wolf. How are you going to go to that game?
Yes, that's the other one I couldn't think of. Clemson, Georgia, and Tennessee, NC State. I'm losing track of all the games that I'm about to go to. But
Charlotte, you got the SEC headquarters, SEC network up there. And Charlotte is this town that, it's got a lot of stuff going on. ACC headquarters downtown. Talk in the last few minutes here before you go, and also let people know how they can follow you, because you do a daily show. You're everywhere, but we got to get you back on because you definitely know what you're talking about. And we may argue about points and stuff, but from those arguments come even better points. And this has got to be repeated.
No doubt. And you can find me on YouTube and just search The Drive with Josh Graham and subscribe there. But and I'm on 3 to 6 live. But Tennessee, NC State, both those teams appeared in the top 25 of the coaches poll yesterday. And you could make an argument where they were both placed 15th and 22nd that both teams were underseeded, undervalued a little bit. We'll see where the AP poll places that when that comes out. But NC State's the team that I think is flying under the radar this year. They were picked 4th in the ACC preseason poll. I think they're going to be in the ACC championship game just because I think the larger your league gets, the more important your schedule becomes. And in a 14-team ACC last year, Louisville benefited from not having to play FSU, Clemson, North Carolina with Drake May, and they made it to the ACC championship game as a result. Like, they got fortunate with the schedule they had. NC State, aside from having to play Clemson, does not have to play Florida State, Miami, or Virginia Tech on its schedule. So things kind of break their way. Their West Coast trip kind of fits well into their schedule. The other teams in the state of North Carolina this year aren't as great as they've been in recent years. So I think the Pack, with Grayson McCall transferring in from Coastal Carolina to play QB, I think that's the team to keep an eye on. And if they beat Tennessee in week 2 in Charlotte, then they emerge on the national stage as being a college football playoff team.
Yeah, right, Josh. Again, great stuff. Johnny, we've run out of time, but, man, these arguments, this is what makes college football so much fun. It never goes to sleep completely, just a little rest here and there. Hey, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. We're blessed. Go bless others. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more great guests talking about the greatest game in the world, college football. Thanks for watching.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.